Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where we're looking at a bunch of tabloids out of September 1977, and we're about to learn that Elvis never divorced Priscilla. Is this true? Could it be true? Well, we're going to find out when we come back from this song, which is about frustration and heartache.
He walked through the chapel, vows gone too fast. Flashbulbs were burning, but the moment didn't last. He carried us singing, sunlight in their bed, but the silence kept whispering inside her head. He's stuck in a hotel of love he can't hold. Every room is crowded, every story grows cold. Frustration's his shadow, it won't let him be. Heartbreak keeps knocking, or flames he can see. He called her my wife, kissed her in the light. She cooked his bacon, held him through the night. But her picture was simple, just two alone, while the world kept intruding. Love turned to stone. Their eyes met again, the fire still strong. He dropped to one knee, said he loved her all along. But the door closed behind them, the moment couldn't stay. She felt the heat fading as he walked away on the speedway. He said she fell in too deep. He kissed her softly, a secret she keep. I'm sorry, he whispered, then he let her go. Now she treasures the memory more than you'll know. He's stuck in a hotel of love he can't hold. Every room is haunted, every story grows cold. Frustration and heartache, they echo through time. Three women, one singer, lost in the rhyme. If love's a hotel, he's trapped in the hall. Doors keep on closing, he can't find home at all.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're hearing more echoes out of September 1977, when we've got a whole bunch of tabloid magazines to look at. But amazingly, they have a lot of facts about Elvis. And we've looked at this magazine, The Only Woman Elvis Ever Loved, Priscilla, Her Story. And it was all about Priscilla. And there was truth in the magazine, as well as a very specific slant. And we looked at this magazine where it says Priscilla, she was his only true love. And I believe the person who is producing this magazine, the publisher, Rupert Murdoch, I believe he's the same guy who published the previous magazine we just looked at. A lot of similarities in the wording and the construction of the stories about Priscilla. I believe it's from an interview that Priscilla gave and was probably paid for. And then they've cut it up into many, many magazines. They're repeating it over and over. They are adding a narrative to the facts that surround the case. That's what the Star is famous for. It took real facts and it mixed them with a specific emotional roller coaster that they wanted the audience to feel, because that's what sells newspapers. And it also gives credibility to whatever they're saying because there are real facts within the story. It's not completely made up like a lesser tabloid. There are some of those out there, and we'll look at a few eventually. But the Star is the main competitor to the National Enquirer. And if you've ever read the Enquirer, the most irritating part of that tattletale magazine is you can't quite tell what's true and what's not because they've mixed in a lot of viewpoints and perspectives with actual facts to push it towards a certain narrative. That's basically what's happening here. The Star has one narrative, the Enquirer has another. They're arch enemies of each other. They're trying to outsell each other in these papers. And what's really happening is that Elvis is getting trashed and he's selling two papers because everybody's buying the Star and the Enquirer. And here's another Star that we're looking at. And it says Elvis believed in life after death. And it had this great picture of Elvis inside. So for all of the Star's faults, every once in a while they can find a fabulous picture. And we talked about this story where Ricky Stanley tells us that Elvis once saved him from the police station after he'd been caught trying to pick up a prescription of Demerol with a forged prescription. So the crime's really about the forged prescription, not even as much about the drug itself, because it wasn't the streets that he was getting it from. He went right to the pharmacy. And the lady behind him, Debbie Watts, we also heard her story. And she told us that she dated Elvis when she was a senior in high school, which would have been in 1973. Now, the paper that we're looking at, the Star, it tried to make it sound like this was something current, but she told us in her own words they went steady for 6 months. So, whatever could have possibly been going on in Debbie's mind, it went on for 6 months, but she did say she loved him for 5 years, so she never stopped loving Elvis. I don't think we could blame a teenage girl for loving Elvis. And we can see in the paper where that story was. Says stepbrother reveals I gave Elvis a massage only hours before he died. Ricky said that he gave Elvis a rub down just before he went to play racquetball. And he was there when Elvis and Ginger, Elvis's girlfriend Ginger Alden, got into their sweatpants and sweatsuits. And they went over to the racquetball court to play with Billy and his wife, Joe Smith. And we saw that Debbie Watts' father was a local famous guy, Sparky Watts, who used to announce for boxing matches on Beale Street. And this is a picture of Debbie Watts in 1973. The year that they say, well, that she says she went steady for 6 months with Elvis Presley. Hi, Louie. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. But this is Debbie Watts. She would have been a senior in high school. She was a senior at Hillcrest High School. And this is Labor Day holiday weekend. And she's out watching young fishermen from the dock at Audubon Lake. Now, I'm sure everybody's heard of Audubon Drive. That's a place where Elvis used to live. And this is Audubon Lake. And when this picture was taken, she planned to enter the Miss Teenage America pageant. Now, yesterday, Cali Girl told us that she was in a Miss America contest. I believe this is what Cali Girl's referring to. At this point, she hadn't entered, but this was the Miss Teenage America pageant, which had its national finals in Memphis in November. This would have been September that this picture was taken. And she says that she dated Elvis in this year. And when she says date, she says go steady. And it basically meant that they drank soda pop and sat on the couch, watched TV at Graceland together. She doesn't say if they were alone. I'm thinking there were other people in there with them. But in this young girl's mind, she had a very special relationship with Elvis. And in this month after he's passed away, he says, I've loved him for 5 years. And then we saw that this episode of Battlestar Galactica, The Lost Warrior, that it links to Elvis. Because this guy is in this episode. This is Red West, Elvis's bodyguard, who he let go in 1976, but who's integral to the story now. Because in the magazine that we're looking through, all of the Star magazines of this period, they're reprinting Elvis What Happened. So there's excerpts, multi-page excerpts, like usually 4 pages per issue, which is wonderful for Rupert Murdoch because he doesn't have to pay anybody to produce material for 4 pages of his weekly magazine, which is a big expense for him. He's already paid Red. Paid him once, not a whole lot. $50,000 split between the 3 of the guys. I believe they've already spent the money by the time Elvis passes away. I can't prove that, but here we are the following year, and Red's playing a bit part on Battlestar Galactica, which was a hit show on television and did cost $1 million per episode. So I don't know how much of that Red got because he wasn't a very important part on it, but he's connected to that program as well. And we can see where they're reprinting portions of the book in the magazine. That's on the right. And on the left was an interview after Elvis has passed away with Red West, written up by our friend Steve Dunleavy, who is the man who wrote Elvis What Happened. Hi, Lorna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So this magazine's not only reprinting Red's book, they're probably paying him a little bit to do some more interviews. So while there was a one-time payment for the book, there's probably a few more payments that connect to doing these magazine interviews. And then we come to this lady because she's in this magazine too. And this is an article called Nurse Became a Substitute Mom to a Lonely Idol. And the magazine says Elvis lavished affection and gifts on a 51-year-old nurse, whom he regarded almost as a mother figure. He once told the nurse, Marion Cox, to look on him as her little boy and described her as his security blanket. So I'm sure some of you have heard of Nurse Cock before. This is before she wrote her book. This is even before she's asked Vernon if she could write her book. And it's probably a little bit before she's actually gathered her memoirs together as she describes in her book in order to write her book. So this is really early stuff from Marion Cock. And it's here in the Star magazine, somewhat indicating that the Star interviewed her. I'm not sure if that's true or if they're pulling her quotes from somewhere else. But this says Nurse Cock, happily married with a 21-year-old daughter, first met Elvis when he was a patient at Memphis Baptist Memorial Hospital. He was recovering from exhaustion after a long tour. Mrs. Cock is administrative supervisor of nursing services at the hospital. Hi, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And here's a quote from Nurse Cock herself. She says, one day Elvis said, "You know, I don't get to talk to people very much." He said he missed the fact that he could not go out and move around like other people. I said, "Honey, you should be getting some sleep." He said, "Please don't go. Stay and talk to me." We talked about his mother and about his childhood. There was never a conversation where his mother did not crop up. He told me of the trauma of losing her and the emotional upset. Shortly after her death, Elvis was put on a troop ship to Germany. He told me every night on that ship, I cried myself to sleep because I missed my mother so much. Hi, Lorna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So, Nurse Cox says that she had at least one deeply emotional conversation with Elvis, and that he shared with her that he could not do things like a normal person and that he missed being normal in that way. And he talked about his mother, who had passed away long before this. So he's still thinking about her. And the article says after the hospital stay, Presley invited the nurse to Graceland for the first of many visits. He bought her a car and he told her, "I don't want you to think I'm mean because it isn't a Cadillac, but Cadillacs are expensive to maintain." So that shows that Elvis knew that sometimes the gifts he gave came with a price and that he was thinking about people that might want to keep his gifts and not sell them right away, like these cars. And he wanted her to be able to maintain it, to be able to afford to keep it, to not feel like it cost so much money she needed to turn it over right away to get the money for something that might be she might also need. Now, if she wanted to do that, Elvis wouldn't have a problem with it, but he bought her a car she could keep. This article says, but other gifts to her included a silver fox stole and expensive jewelry and rings. He also took her and her daughter Katie on several cross country flights in his private jet plane. Nurse Cock details those in her book if you've never read her book, but she does go into a lot of detail about those flights on the Lisa Marie. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. When Mrs. Cock once protested about the gifts, Elvis told her, "It's no fun having money unless you can give it to people you love." Now, some people say that the things that Nurse Cox says are made up. And they're here in the Star magazine, so we might question. But when you hear a line like, it's no fun having money unless you can give it to people you love, either Elvis said this to her because it sounds so Elvis, or she knew a lot about Elvis. Does it mean that everything she said was true, but she must have had some deep knowledge of Elvis because this is something a true fan would say for sure, if not Elvis himself. And this article says during visits to Graceland, Nurse Cock filled the role of mother with Elvis's girlfriends. She would sit and talk with Linda Thompson and later Ginger Alden as Elvis looked on. So Nurse Cock says that she played the role of mother, meaning she gave advice to Linda Thompson and Ginger Alden, had conversations with them, at least in her mind. She did. This article says it was Mrs. Cock whom Elvis first told of his engagement to Ginger. Is that a detail anyone's aware of? At least in Miss Cock's mind, she was the first person that Elvis told of his engagement to Ginger. And she's quoted as saying, but I know he loved Priscilla. So Nurse Cock is saying she was there when the engagement occurred. She knows that it happened. They told her about it, Elvis and Ginger together. And yet Nurse Cock says, but I know he loved Priscilla. And so that supports the Priscilla narrative that's within the Star magazine. And perhaps that's why Nurse Cock's featured in the Star magazine. Not necessarily. It is one little line. But it lines right up with what they're saying. And for some reason, Nurse Marion Cock believes this. And she also said, one night we were laughing and talking about having children. I told him I had always wanted a little boy and had never had one. Elvis said, you have got me now. He always called me his security blanket. And Sarge says that Lisa was friendly with her. And Deborah says that she's really interested in the divorce. Well, you're in luck, Deborah, because that's what we're coming up on next. And to give everybody enough opportunity to get in here so that they'd be able to be here when we moved on to the big story of the day, which is on this page that has Nurse Cock's story. But you can see next to it, it says Elvis and Priscilla were still legally married, her lawyer says. And Deborah says that no, Elvis was not in love with Priscilla in the end. Pat says that Elvis may have loved Priscilla at one time, but not at the end. And I don't know offhand the last time that Nurse Cock actually spoke with Elvis or saw him. Emma agrees that Elvis was not in love with Priscilla at the end. But he may have still been married, at least according to this article. Now, what does this article say? Well, first, let's look at this picture because many of you are first going to bring up the fact that Elvis was divorced, that we know this to be true. And Pat says that she knows Elvis is divorced and that the lawyer is lying. Well, we're going to find out, Pat. Let's walk our way through it. Here's what the Los Angeles Times says. It says Presley gave his ex-wife a friendly kiss before driving off. The couple, married in Las Vegas on May 1st, 1967, agreed on a $1.5 million settlement. And this was photographed by an LA photographer, kind of how we have the photograph. And the LA Times says LA Times photographer George Fry was assigned to the story in West Los Angeles at the Santa Monica courthouse. Fry walked up to Elvis and Priscilla as they arrived. He introduced himself as a photographer for the LA Times. Elvis and Priscilla agreed to photos after the divorce court hearing. When done in court, the Presleys came down the hallway smiling and smooching. And then he says they were still great friends. I shot 15 to 16 frames and I had an exclusive. I'm the only guy to shoot this. No paparazzi anywhere. I had the best job in the world. Fry used a Rolleiflex camera with a 55mm lens and exposed 220 black and white film for those of you who are interested in photography. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. You're just in time. Now, look at this picture. Elvis looks like he knows something, doesn't he? He looks like he knows something. Does he know that they're still married? Or does he believe they're divorced as they're walking out of this room? Deborah says, so they had to be divorced. We've got the pictures right here, right? What do you think this guy is behind Elvis? I really don't know. The one that's in between Elvis and Priscilla's head. But he's just right there in the middle of the picture. But it's really Elvis's expression that I love in this picture. And you can see he's wearing one of those tracksuits that he likes. And Pat is asking, does anyone think Elvis loved Priscilla when she took him to court the second time? Good question. You can see Priscilla's got a very fancy outfit. She's actually kind of outdressed Elvis here. And she has this long, it looks tattered on the end, but it has to be tattered on purpose. It's a very long coat that I don't know what it's really made out of, but in this black and white picture, it appears to be leather of different colors. I'm sure it's some fabric, but it looks somewhat primitive because of the way that it's tattered at the bottom. And like it probably has real leather cuffs, possibly leather upper sleeves. And someone's saying that's Vernon behind Elvis. I don't know. It might be. Pat's saying that. Yeah, it might be. And that Pat's saying this is the point. They're here. They've got to be divorced. So the article from the magazine says Elvis Presley was still legally married to Priscilla, even though their marriage broke up 4 years ago. Priscilla's lawyer confirmed this week. Now, that's some strong language. They're not saying that Priscilla's lawyer stated or that he asserted or that he filed a motion. They're saying he confirmed they're still married. Jen says that look was popular leather patchwork that Priscilla is wearing. And Deborah says Vernon went to court with Elvis. Good knowledge, because then that means that maybe is Vernon behind him. And Jen agrees that's Vernon behind Elvis. And Emma says that whatever this coat cost, she doesn't think it was worth the money. That's funny. It's possible she designed it herself. I don't know. Is this the Biss and Boo period? Or that maybe her the Biss portion of the And if you've never seen an interview with her partner, from Biss and Boo, there is one recently from last year on those Elvis girls. It is amazing. It's an amazing interview. You really should watch it. Um, can't say enough good things about those Elvis. But to get back into this article, it says a judge granted them a divorce in October 1973 on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. So this is exactly what everybody in the chat is saying, that they are divorced on the grounds of irreconcilable differences in October 1973, October 9th, 1973. That's when these pictures are taken. And Deborah's saying, how long ago did you say her lawyer is saying that they weren't divorced? This is September 1977. Elvis has not been gone for even a month when Priscilla's lawyers are saying, or one lawyer is saying, she's still married to him. So this isn't a bombshell story in the sense that it just came out, but I think it's a bombshell in the sense of the timing of when the story actually appeared. Some of us might believe that Priscilla began this movement from ex-wife to unresolved love to widow some point later in the timeline, maybe 1978 or 79, or even later when she actually determines they're going to open Graceland as a museum. And so you might say, well, she had to do these things in order to keep the museum running, to finance things, to get things done. But here, we're all the way back in the month after Elvis passed away. We're still in the emotional aftermath. I don't think any fiscal moves have actually been taken yet. And Marion's asking about the coat if Emma knows if Priscilla designed it or Biss. I would be interested in either one of them. And I don't think she bought it off a rack anywhere. And Emma's saying that she doesn't know either, that she's also wondering if it's from Biss and Boo, and agrees that that interview was amazing. So we've got Emma from Just a Girl Who Loves Elvis. And be sure to check out Emma's channel, as well as defending Elvis Presley, Louis, who is here. I don't know if he's still here with us. I know he's got a family he's got to attend to during this period of the day. And Terry's channel, Elvis History. Be sure to check out all three of these other channels. They're putting out great stuff too. And Deborah says that the first divorce was finalized and filed. And Pat says if they weren't divorced, why did she take Elvis to court twice? Exactly. Exactly. There's a lot of questions here. So the article goes on to say that although the judge granted them the divorce, neither Elvis nor Priscilla bothered to obtain a final judgment, which was essential if either of them wanted to marry again. In the eyes of the law, they were still man and wife at the time of Elvis's death. So this is the legal explanation. Let me go over this again. Neither Elvis nor Priscilla obtained a final judgment. So I think what we're being told is that they were granted the divorce, but there was a piece of paperwork that had to be done on both sides, and that it wasn't done by either one, and that this was essential if either wanted to marry again. That they wouldn't be able to get married again without doing it. And that in the eyes of the law, and I don't know what other eyes we'd be talking about because it's a legal matter, right? But in the eyes of the law, they were still man and wife at the time of Elvis's death. Pat says even Billy and Joe Smith said they were divorced and Elvis wasn't looking back. And that this is bull manure. Well, let's hear from Priscilla's attorney, Arthur Toll. Arthur says, Priscilla never indicated to me that she wanted to file for the final judgment of divorce, and obviously, Elvis had not instructed his attorneys to do it either. All right, let's look at this again. Priscilla never indicated to me. So this lawyer says he went, like, he must have been here, right? Where we're looking at this picture on October 9th, 1973. And what he says is, well, I was there. I mean, they had the divorce and it was granted, but she never said, hey, we should go through with this. So I didn't file it. I don't know if that's the way divorces work or not. I've never been divorced, so I don't know. Do you have to tell the lawyer to finish the thing? I mean, I feel like, did he collect payment to finish it? That's the other question I would have. But he didn't finish it for Priscilla. And he says, obviously, Elvis didn't do it either. Elvis didn't instruct her, his side to do it. And I assume he's saying that because it's not filed. And he's able to check on that in some way. We don't really know. He doesn't tell us how he knows that Elvis didn't instruct his attorneys to do it. He just says it's obvious. This article then starts making legal statements of its own. It's not quoting anyone. I guess they want us to assume that Arthur feels this way, but it's not a quote from Arthur. It says, if Elvis had intended to marry his girlfriend Ginger Alden, he would certainly have filed for a final judgment of divorce. If he had not and gone through with the marriage, it could have been challenged. So there's a lot to unpack here. If Elvis had intended to marry his girlfriend Ginger, so I'm sure there are some people that will look at this and say, oh, well, he never filed for divorce. Therefore, it is as they say, with this jump in logic, he would have done that if he meant to marry Ginger. I don't know that that necessarily follows. Maybe his lawyer said, well, Elvis never instructed me to go ahead and finish the thing, so I didn't file it, just like Priscilla's did. I don't know. I don't know that we can judge intentionality for the marriage to Ginger because supposedly it was going to be a few months in the future, so maybe they could still get it taken care of. And Pat's asking if I honestly think that they were or were not married. Well, let's get to the end of the article and then we'll make some judgment. Toll said that the matter had no bearing on Elvis's will. Now, isn't it weird that you would come out and say that your client is still married to this very rich man who just passed away and then say, but this does not affect the will? Now, why doesn't it affect the will? Arthur says, and remember, Arthur is Priscilla's attorney. Arthur says, at the time of the divorce hearing, Priscilla agreed to waive any rights to inherit any of Elvis's assets. So the attorney is indicating that in the divorce, they agreed that Priscilla wouldn't inherit any of Elvis's assets. I don't understand how that's applicable here. The attorney just said they're still married. So there hasn't been a divorce. So what difference does it make what was agreed to in a divorce settlement if there was no divorce? Therefore, she hasn't waived any rights. They're not divorced. And yet he says, oh, well, she agreed to this, so she's not going to get any of his inheritance. And why would she say that she doesn't want any of the inheritance? And Deborah says that he didn't leave her anything. But even if he didn't leave her anything, if she was his wife, I'm pretty sure she could have got most of it. But that is a very important point. I don't really know how that would have worked out. And it would have probably not been in her favor, according to what she's already been given in the divorce decree. That's what we're going to look at now. So then it says that Priscilla, who is age 32, came out of the divorce settlement with almost $2 million in cash. Well, in the article from the LA Times, it says 1.5 million. So I'm not really sure what the truth of that is, but that's all the LA Times article said, 1.5 million. Well, it turns out there was more than 1.5 million. The Star is saying, and when the Star starts to quote actual numbers and such, you can pretty much guarantee they're quoting a real source, because they're not, the Star doesn't risk liability. They go, or libeling someone, they go right up to the edge, close as they can run it. But when they show real numbers, this means they have some piece of paper they can pull out and say, yeah, it was here. Doesn't mean that piece of paper was honest, but it at least means that they're pulling it from some source. And this says 2 million, almost 2 million in cash, plus stock from two of Presley's companies, Elvis Presley Music Incorporated and White Haven Music Incorporated. This is about music publishing. So she got pieces of Elvis's music publishing. And I'm wondering, Elvis almost immediately decides to sell off the rights to his music in order to pay her a cash lump sum settlement out of this divorce, right? I'm sure everybody remembers this 1973 selling of the rights. Well, he's already given portions of the rights over to Priscilla, so once he sells these off, I guess he's maybe feeling like it's not that big a loss because he's already gave up a bunch of them to her. I'm not sure about that. I've never really thought about that till I saw it listed here. And Pat says if they hadn't divorced, why did she need to take Vernon to court after they died? Well, I think it's because she's got her cake and she's trying to eat it too. Right? She wants to be the widow, but she doesn't want to get locked into what Elvis would have given her as the widow, which was nothing when you end up looking at the will. So if she got stuck with the will, well, then she wouldn't have got 2 million in cash. She wouldn't have got the stock in the Elvis Presley. It would all revert back to Elvis. If they were still married, right? It'd be joint property of some kind. Now, could he have left all of his joint property to someone that's not his wife? She could have probably had a really good legal argument there and got in, but this is already assured. It's already signed and agreed to. Bye, Emma. Thank you so much for stopping by. I understand people got lives they got to live. But let's move on with this article. It says the rock star Elvis also agreed to provide. Now, when they use the word provide, that's a very interesting word because in this usage it means pay. But they make it sound like provide is a more nurturing word. Like Elvis is nurturing Priscilla. It says provide $4,000 a month until their daughter Lisa Marie reached age 18. Elvis also agreed to pay all her medical bills and tuition, Lisa Marie's medical bills and tuition. All right, now here's a really interesting part. One that I've often heard: Elvis had no life insurance. This article says Elvis took out a $100,000 life insurance policy with Lisa Marie as the beneficiary as part of this divorce. So it's not life insurance that would have gone anywhere. It would have most likely gone into the trust for Lisa Marie. But I don't know that I've never heard anyone mention this. Have you guys ever heard of this life insurance? I've often heard what happened to the life insurance. Why wasn't there life insurance? And he didn't have life insurance in the sense that we normally think of it, but apparently he did as part of this settlement. In addition, Elvis had to pay Priscilla $725,000 within 10 days. I assume that's part of the 2 million in cash. He then had to pay 720,000 in monthly installments of $6,000 or more. Elvis also gave Priscilla one half of their net proceeds from the sale of their Bel Air home, and the total gross sale price was estimated to be $750,000. So he basically gave her half of that as well. I don't know if that was in addition to the 2 million. I think that was part of it. During the course of the property settlement hearings, you guys are really going to find this super interesting. During the course of the property settlement hearings, Arthur, the lawyer, Priscilla's lawyer, produced evidence which showed that between 1967 and 1972, the years Elvis and Priscilla were married, Elvis's gross receipts, that's the money he brought in from his revenue streams into his own bank account, came to more than $25 million. Sounds like a lot, right? Especially when you consider that in today's money, that would be just under $250 million. However, and this is a major however, Elvis's minimum after tax net. So what they're saying is after we take taxes out of that 25 million, what is Elvis left with? And this is saying he's left with at least this. However, we should remember that whatever this number is, this is the number they had to work off of when they determined what these splits were going to be for the divorce. Okay, this is the true number that everything's calculated from. And this most likely represents what Elvis made for this 6-year period. What he really got to spend. His minimum after tax net was $5,228,600. So of the 25 million that he made, he got to keep around 5 million. So we look at Priscilla and we think about how terrible it is and how much money that she spent. Now she took so much money from Elvis. We think about the money that some of the guys took from Elvis or that they made for what they said about Elvis. We've already seen that the people who pay them this money, they make much, much, much more money for trashing Elvis. But who is the biggest villain in the Elvis story? Well, it might be Uncle Sam, because Uncle Sam didn't trash Elvis. He just beat Elvis up and took $20 million of his 25. He said, here's $25 million you made. You get to keep 5. Does that sound right to you? I'm sure this is the way it was for every rich person, but is this not truly unbelievable that Elvis got to keep so little of the money? And this 25 million, if you believe that Colonel was skimming a lot of money as well as others, 25 million is what Elvis got to keep after all the skimming. And then the government comes in and they take $20 million. And so over 6 years, he got to spend less than $1 million a year. It really changes your whole idea about how much money Elvis had, right? And how much money was moving around Elvis. Money he never got to use. Now, under the original financial settlement, according to this article, that Priscilla had agreed to, she would have gotten 2 cars, a motorcycle, and $100,000. And $1,000 a month as alimony until August 15th, 1977, which ends up being the day before Elvis died. That was the original settlement. Is that not kind of eerie? That the original settlement, the $1,000 a month in alimony, would end on August 15th, 1977, the day before what we know happened? This article says Elvis and Priscilla saw each other rarely following their split, and friends of Priscilla this week discounted rumors that they had been planning a reconciliation. Now, I want you to remember this is the same magazine, The Star, that gave us a story that said there was a reconciliation, that there was an unnamed friend of Priscilla's who said just last week, the week before Elvis died, Priscilla was talking about Elvis calling and saying he loved her all the time and he wanted her to move back to Memphis. Same paper. Maybe not this issue, but the same paper. And now they're saying, oh, well, friends of Priscilla. Well, they said, no, there was no reconciliation. Is that the same unnamed friend who gave us the other information? We don't know. This article says Priscilla herself also has made it plain that she had no plans to remarry. Is that what Priscilla made plain in the earlier articles that we've already read that said Elvis still loved me and I was waiting it out with Ginger? So this Star magazine, they're playing it both ways. Whether you like her or whether you love her, they've got you covered within this magazine. They're like Colonel Tom Parker. If you love Elvis, he's got a lapel pin he can sell you. If you hate Elvis, he has a lapel pin he can sell you. Rupert Murdoch, but whatever flavor of Priscilla you like, he's got it. He's ready to provide it. Priscilla herself says, I am enjoying this incredible feeling of doing something, earning my own living, of being for the first time in my life dependent on nobody, a young mother just like any other. I am bringing up my daughter the best way I know how, trying to give her a normal childhood in a world where everybody knows her name. Now, if you're making your own way in the world, do you take your ex-husband back to court and take a lot more of his money? I mean, maybe you do. If you're, for the first time in your life, dependent on nobody, does that include this money that you got from your ex-husband? Now, I guess we could say she earned it. That's kind of what a divorce is, right? Like they split it up kind of the way that you earned it. Maybe one person in the marriage earned all the money, but the other one kept the home running. And then they split up all the stuff. So it all depends on how you look at the divorce and what you think of what we just went through, that they split up and gave away to Priscilla and to Elvis what he got to keep. And maybe that does mean for the first time in her life, she's dependent on nobody. And she says she's bringing up her daughter the best way she knows how, trying to give her a normal child. And that's what I've got for you today. I do have one more wonderful picture where Elvis looks like he knows he didn't get a good deal out of this. That's what I think he's saying in this picture, but maybe he's got totally different thoughts in his head. He is wearing some kind of crazy beads around his neck, though. I just noticed that. Not really sure what's going on with that. Almost looks like it's the cord from a curtain. She's wearing a very long, kind of crazy necklace as well. So, unfortunately, we don't know how it comes out. I think what was trying to be said here legally is that Priscilla's the widow, but only use the widow for press purposes. We don't actually want her to be a widow because we'll have to give all the money back. And the whole divorce settlement will be null and void. And we'll have to work this whole thing out again in a much more less friendly environment. And so this is what this magazine said. We're going to move forward and look at other magazines. Maybe they come back and they explain this again. It feels to me like this was not a special of the Star, that this guy said this out in public. It must be in other publications. Seems like it would have been an awful big story. But it also seems ridiculous that you would put this story forward, but at the same time claim that the agreements made in the divorce proceeding still hold true. But that's where we're going to leave it for today. And Sarge is saying that this necklace Elvis is wearing was from the Hilton, and it was too heavy to wear at concerts, and he gave it to a dancer during Aloha from Hawaii. Well, that's interesting. I think that's an American flag pin he's wearing too. And that shows up a lot in, apparently there were multiples of these American flag pins. And they show up a lot on the auction circuit. But I'm going to leave it there for today. And I'm going to go out on a song. This one is Heartache and Frustration, because that's what Elvis is dealing with here in these articles. Although he was at peace at this point. He didn't have to actually see any of this. But September 1977, we're seeing the origin of every single myth that we know in the Elvis universe. And until I see you guys all again, y'all keep on taking care of business. This is Heartache and Frustration.
He walked through the chapel, vows gone too fast. Flashbulbs were burning, but the moment didn't last. He carried us singing, sunlight in their bed, but the silence kept whispering inside her head. He's stuck in a hotel can't hold. Every room is crowded, every story grows cold. Frustration's his shadow, it won't let him be. Heartbreak keeps knocking, old flames you can see. He called her mine, kissed her in the light. She cooked his bacon, held him through the night. But her picture was simple, just two alone. While the world kept intruding, love turned to stone. The eyes met again, the fire's still strong. He dropped to one knee, said he loved her all along. But the door closed behind him, the moment couldn't stay. She felt that he faded as he walked away. On the speedway set, she fell in too deep. He kissed her softly, a secret she'd keep. I'm sorry, he whispered, then he let her go. Now she treasures a memory more than you know. He's stuck in a hotel of love he can't hold. Every room is haunted, every story grows cold. Frustration and heartache, they echo through time. Three women, one singer, lost in the rhyme. Love's a hotel. trapped in the hall. Doors keep on closing. He can't find home at all.